Wireless is a concept so ubiquitous today it often conceals its historical origins. Nevertheless, the concept and technology originated from a young man who tenaciously worked in an attic. In his own words, every day sees humanity more victorious in the struggle with space and time. As Guglielmo Marconi progressed through life, he became a visionary figure who innovated wireless telegraphy, who revolutionized the communication that weaved society together in his time, pulling the world out of the era of silence. In the exigencies of World War I, wireless telegraphy demonstrated its communication potential on land, at sea, and in air, leading to its widespread influence in our entangled world today.
This is really a global story in the sense that Marconi was everywhere, but he also touched so many different aspects of modern life.
A documentary of Guglielmo Marconi. Revolutionary innovations stem from the need for a revolutionary change, and Marconi's incentives were no different. Marconi was born in a wealthy family in Bologna, a city in northern Italy. Raised by his Italian and Irish parents and their unorthodox view on education, Marconi was homeschooled and gradually grew passionate about science and electricity. In the 19th century, the predominant form of communication was mail. As the passion for electricity sprouted, Samuel Morse introduced the telegraph in 1844 and Alexander Bell invented the telephone in 1876. These technologies were transformative, delivering messages instantly from one end of a continent to another. However, these elaborate networks faced one challenge: wires. No matter how far the wires spanned, they were incapable of communications beyond land, whether it be on oceans or in air. At the age of 20, Marconi read articles about the experiments carried out by physicist Henry Hertz, who proved the existence of electromagnetic waves. Linking the demand for greater scopes of transmissions and the precursors of innovation, Marconi began his journey for wireless communication. Day after day through 1895, Guglielmo Marconi immersed himself in the laboratory of his family's attic. His mother supported him, but his father doubted his work. So treating the opportunity as if it was the last, Marconi pursued his research for 2 years. At the heart of his research was the transmission of electromagnetic waves. A spark jumps across the gap between two live wires and emits electromagnetic radiation, spreading out in all directions. This causes a second spark in the receiver. One day, Marconi got an electric bell to ring from a distance of 9 meters, and soon, these messages were transmitted beyond visible range. When Marconi was confident in his apparatus of communication, he connected with William Preece, an electrical engineer who worked in the British government-owned post office. Preece saw potentials in Marconi's invention and coordinated an exhibit to demonstrate Marconi's work to a public audience. Gavin Waitman later commented on the exhibit. No messages were being sent at all, just an invisible electronic signal. But in 1896, that was sensational enough. From that day onwards, the post office supported Marconi's research, and Marconi soon planned to bridge the Atlantic Ocean with wireless communication. His ambition was doubted by skeptics who insisted that radio waves travel in straight lines that indefinitely extend outwards. Later in life, Marconi would find that radio waves reflected off the curvature of the Earth's ionosphere, but at that time, Marconi didn't know. But he persisted, building the biggest transmitting station yet seen at Poldhu, southern England. On December 12, 1901, Marconi set up a receiver station at Newfoundland, Canada, and received faint signals of Morse code from Poldhu. It was this combination of belief, perseverance, and luck that delivered the first transatlantic wireless signal, something never thought possible before. Little did he know, that signal was only one of its many feats in the years to come. On the moonless and freezing midnight hours of April 15, 1912, a ship sailed calmly in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It was the Titanic. Dark clouds shrouded the passenger liner and ocean waves slapped against its giant hull. Suddenly, the ship struck an iceberg and passengers rocked out of their beds, anxious about the dire circumstance. Under the cabins, wireless officers Jack Phillips and Harold Bright sent SOS signals, as well as CQD, a distress signal invented by Marconi. "Come at once, we have struck a berg." These famous signals reached Carpathia, a ship 50 miles to the southeast of Titanic, bringing hope before the last tip of Titanic perished. When only sirens on drifting lifeboats were left, Carpathia came into sight and rescued 700 passengers. Prior to Titanic's first voyage, the ship had carefully employed the cutting-edge technology of wireless communication. The main transmitter and receiver were located in the Marconi suite, a series of 3 rooms on the officers' quarters. It was this planning that allowed Titanic to send wireless signals in its most critical hours, and it was these wireless signals that saved 700 lives that would have otherwise died with the ship. Immediate impacts of wireless communication emerged in World War I. At the outbreak of the war, both sides held different views on wireless telegraphy. Britain stuck to its wire telegraphy system because it has long established a network of wires that extended underground and underwater to connect its vast empire. On the other hand, Germany quickly adopted wireless because they couldn't outmatch Britain in communication otherwise. Britain continued to use traditional communication methods, which included signal lights, semaphores, and wired telegraphy, but all of them had problems. Signal lights were so obvious that enemies could also observe them far away. Semaphores were almost impossible to see in the dark, and wired telegraphy was easily destroyed by heavy artillery in trench warfare. Realizing these problems, the British Navy equipped itself with wireless telegraphy. In May 1916, the German Navy planned to launch an ambush on the British Grand Fleet in the North Sea off the ports of Jutland, Denmark. However, the British found out the German plans using a wireless direction-finding system, a system that used triangulation to track down the specific distance and angle of the transmitter. Initially, the Grand Fleet suffered heavy defeat, but Admiral David Beatty made a decision to form a line of dreadnoughts to trap the Germans on their way back to the German ports. This decision was communicated through wireless and allowed all 150 battleships to turn and maneuver without a single clash. When the Germans fell for the trap, British fires focused on the leading German battleship and forced the Germans to retreat. After all, the Battle of Jutland was indecisive, but the Royal Fleet may have lost completely if there wasn't the effective naval communication that changed the tides of the battle.
If it had been not just a defeat in some detail, so that the blockade of Germany could no longer be maintained, that would have had a decisive effect on the outcome of the war.
In November 1917, the British planned to break the trench impasse and take the city of Cambrai. In previous battles, British forces always suffered from frontline mobility problems because the wires they used stuck with the trenches they were in. But this time, the British Army adopted a newer version of wireless telegraphy known as continuous waveset, which used smaller transmitters and receivers to send even clearer messages. These transmitters and receivers were portable, so the British equipped infantry and tanks with the new technology. But there was more. Craig Moore, a military history author, quotes, "The Royal Flying Corps provided the artillery with aerial photographs, accurate information on enemy battery locations, the fall of shells, and the current location of friendly forces." In this case, wireless allowed pilots and infantry to communicate in real time, a strategy that was employed for the first time. The Germans always had their own wireless, but rather than making them light and portable, they treated them like wired telegraphy by setting up huge stations of transmitters and receivers. Both the Battle of Jutland and Battle of Cambrai yielded only partial victories for Britain and its allies, but these battles became the turning points of war, when the British military exploited the wireless communication potentials that saved them from defeat. On July 20th, 1937, Marconi died in Rome after a severe heart attack. On that day, all transmitters around the globe were silenced for 2 minutes as a mark of respect. It was the last time the ambient air was rid of the wireless. Even as Marconi died, the impacts of wireless communication are long-lasting. Marconi's wireless communication inspired many other engineers and scientists of his day. One of those people was Reginald Fessenden. Using the continuous wave set that was first invented in the Battle of Cambrai, Fessenden dug deeper into the field and invented the radio. As a portable source of entertainment and information that are often attached to automobiles, radios not only allowed those who were illiterate to keep up with the news, but also transformed countries like the United States as a whole under a mass culture. The Marconi company also contributed towards electric scanning with images, which led the path to high-definition television. But perhaps the most important of all his legacies, Marconi envisioned a world where people communicated directly through wireless.
Marconi actually, and as broadcasting developed, Marconi talked increasingly about the dialogic possibilities. So in that sense, we really do live in the communication world that Marconi envisioned.
So when you look at the interconnected world surrounding us today, and the freedom of communication we enjoy, also remember the tenacious spirit for innovation. Remember the hundreds of lives saved on a freezing night. And remember that when Guglielmo Marconi revolutionized the very way of communication and invigorated the Allied powers to victory, he determined the crossroads of history. The crossroads of conventions and innovations. The crossroads of stagnation and breakthrough. When the world needed a step to be taken, Marconi inspired the direction. One that saved lives, ended wars, but most importantly, connected the world.